Up next, we have a motion here by council proclaiming the date of February 7th, 2021.
A new nationwide initiative that celebrates Canadian literature is here.
As I read the Canadian Day in for the town of Marathon.
For the first time ever, in the town of Marathon, happening on February 17th, 2021.
All in favor? Carried, thank you.
I Read Canadian Day is a national celebration of Canadian books for young people. Join us on February 18th, 2021 with readings from local marathon author Mr. David Giuliano. David Giuliano is an award-winning writer of articles, essays, and poems. His book, Postcards from the Valley, Encounters with Fear, Faith, and God, was a Canadian bestseller. He has published 2 illustrated children's books, The Alligator and Naomi's Pillow, and Jeremiah and the Letter. His most recent book, It's Good to Be Here, Stories We Tell About Cancer, is a spiritual memoir about his 20-year journey with cancer. David and his wife are current residents of Marathon, Ontario. Families, schools, libraries, and organizations. Join us on February 18th at 1 p.m. The Alligator in Naomi's Pillow. After the reading, there will be a question and answer period to follow. Also, join us that night at 6 p.m. where there will be a live session. It's Good to Be Here, Stories We Tell About Cancer. If you have any questions, please contact us at the Marathon Public Library.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's start the party.
Sometimes I get a good feeling, yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Mitchell Hatton and I'm the Technology Assistant at the Marathon Public Library that is located in Marathon, Ontario, Canada. I am so happy to have you all here today as we celebrate I Read Canadian, with individuals joining us from all over the globe. I Read Canadian Day empowers families, schools, libraries, bookstores, and organizations to host activities and events. I Read Canadian started on February 19th, 2020 as an initiative to provide literacy reading in Canada. I Read Canadian empowers all individuals to read a book for just 15 minutes. He's a spiritual guide, writer, and speaker, award-winning writer of articles, essays, and poems. His Postcards from the Valley, Encounters with Fear, Faith, and God was a Canadian bestseller. Today, David is joining us to speak about his book, It's Good to Be Here, Stories We Tell About Cancer. If you have any questions after the reading, please put them in the chat or use the raise your hand function to let us know, and we will be sure to call on you. And with that, I'm just going to let everyone know that we are recording our meeting right now, and we are live all over Facebook, and I am going to pass it off to David. You're muted. We still can't hear you.
Did he maybe plug in a microphone or something and then unplugged it? Because sometimes I know that happens in Zoom meetings. It doesn't realize that.
Oh, I think we might hear you now.
There, I'm just hardwiring in here. Sorry about that. I don't know, the Bluetooth was working earlier, but we won't mess around with it right now. So what I was saying is, thank you, Mitchell. Mitchell is the tech guy at our library, and actually, Heather, he's in Thunder Bay working for our library in Marathon, but he's from Marathon, and technically, I guess you live across the street too, Mitchell.
Yep.
So it's a small town. You know how these things work. Anyway, I'm really, really pleased that the library and Mitchell invited me to have these readings and to support the I Read Canadian event that our town approved and was good enough to support in their things. And it's hard because I have a feeling, Carrie Lynn and Heather, you've probably both read Good to Be Here, but I'm not sure about everyone on Facebook. So what I think I'm going to do, if that's all right, is I'm going to start just by reading the introduction because it'll kind of orient people to the book. We can have some conversation, and if there's time, I'll read another little short piece from it before we're done. Sound okay? If you're watching on Facebook, you can give a thumbs up too. So again, it's good to be here, and what do I need to say by way of introduction? This book came out in 2018, and it's had a lot of people have appreciated it, and so I'm glad that I've been able to share it. And yeah, the short story is it's a memoir of my journey with cancer and my attempt to find different ways of talking about that. And for me, there's a lot of spirituality that's a part of that journey. And I know that people who have read it, you know, have different stories they tell and different ways to talk about it. But these are the stories that I found healing. And if we want to talk about the difference between cure and healing, we can do that after I read this. So this is from the preface, and it's called Stories, That's All We Are. It's good to be here. Whenever I'm asked to speak publicly, that's how I like to start. I try to remember it at the start of every day. I wish I could remember it at the beginning of every day. I've been treated for cancer on and off for more than 20 years. To paraphrase Keith Richards, the hard-living co-founder of the Rolling Stones, it's really good to be anywhere. And it is good to share some stories. I share them to remind myself of the small miracles, the precious slant of the afternoon light, the sound of a prayer, the attentiveness to beauty. That illness awakened in me. I share these stories hoping that there will be a redemption in the telling for me and maybe for you. In his 2003 Massey Lectures for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Indigenous writer and broadcaster Thomas King would begin each of his talks saying, "There is a story I know," and then he would tell the ancient story about the creation of the earth on the turtle's back. He concluded each telling of the creation with the words, "The truth about stories is, that's all we are." The stories we tell and are told create us, our identity, our culture, our values, and worldview. They are how we make meaning in our lives and bring depth to our humanity. Stories can expand us or shrink us, and the world we inhabit as well. If we are told as children that the world is a safe and beautiful place, it will powerfully impact how we engage in it. And the same is true if we grow up hearing that strangers are dangerous and not to be trusted. If we're told that we are good and kind creatures, there is a very good chance that we will turn out that way. But the stories we're told can also bring us shame and destroy our souls. In illness, the stories we tell and are told can bring comfort and insight. They can shape treatment and amplify healing. Over the past 20 years and multiple recurrences of cancer, I have heard and told many stories about illness. Some of those stories have been healing and others have not. My medical condition is a 2-word short story entitled dermatofibrosarcoma protuberans. I hardly ever say that word. It's DFSP for short because dermatofibrosarcoma protuberans is a long and boring and, for all but the clinically inclined, and incomprehensible story. It is recorded in digital databases and on clipboards. Its plot is a marathon of surgeries, radiation, treatments, climbing blood pressures, strokes, and medication. On its own, the medical narrative isn't very inspiring. It's like the manual for my television remote. It's complicated, necessary, and potentially helpful, but it doesn't tell you anything about me. It doesn't tell you who I love or what I like on my pancakes or how I've lived with or made sense of suffering and illness over the years. In a 2009 TED Talk called The Danger of a Single Story, the Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie described how every life and every culture is a product of stories layered on stories, like geological strata. Human beings are diminished, robbed of our variegated, imperfect, beautiful humanity when we are reduced to a single story. Cancer patient, for example. When you hear that I'm a cancer survivor, you might imagine that I am tragically heroic, battling the disease just like everyone else who has cancer. I'm neither tragic nor heroic. Most people with cancer aren't either. In fact, as you will see, the battle metaphor is a bit of tinfoil in my teeth. I'm much more than my illness, and my experience of illness is far more complex than a single metaphor. This book of stories I've been told and that I tell myself about cancer. Sorry, this is a book about stories I've been told and tell myself about cancer. Some of them have advanced my healing and enriched my life. Others have flattened me and my humanity into something one-dimensional. This is not a book about the failures of the medical system, nor is it about practical solutions for fixing it. There are plenty of ideas elsewhere about that. It is a book about humanizing our experience and understanding of illness in general and cancer in particular. So I'm going to stop there and we can have some conversation. Carrie Lynn and Heather and Mitchell can ask questions, and I know Mitchell's kind of monitoring Facebook, so if some questions pop up there, he can pass them on. And yeah, let's talk about it. And if you, I think you two have read it, and if there's stuff you want to talk about different than the introduction, that's great too. Okay then, well, it's been nice, and
David, you're right. I did read it. It's been a little while now,
yeah.
But one of the things I remember is you talking about why you don't like the words, cancer is a battle. Or battling cancer. And I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And if I want to say first that if the battle metaphor is one that has supported you. If you're listening, please don't let I'm describing my experience. I'm not prescribing it for someone else.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, there's a number of things about the battle metaphor that are difficult. And it's kind of that thing, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything's a nail. And a lot of times battle is not what the human body needs. Sometimes it's love and gentleness and rest. And there is this kind of pressure to not give up. You know, how many obituaries have you read that begin after losing a battle with cancer? And I always feel like I do not want to die a loser. Yeah, I may succumb to cancer at some point, but I didn't lose a battle with it. And I think of one person in particular. I forget the name change that I used in the book, but you know, someone who was encouraged and perceived herself as a fighter all the time, and so it came to the point where her cancer was completely untreatable anymore. And even, you know, her doctors and surgeons are saying there's nothing more we can do. But, you know, I went to visit her the last time, and she had all of her lower jaw taken off, and she was bandaged, and, you know, the weeping, and she couldn't speak. And, you know, I forget how I worded it, but I said something along the lines of, you know, she said, I'm a fighter, like she was writing me notes, I'm a fighter. And I said, you know, when do you think you want to stop fighting? And she said, never, I'll never give up. And so it leads to kind of heroic treatments that are cruel and violent. I mean, she lived, I don't know whether she lived any longer, but she sure had a hell of a last year of her life. And I think that leads us to that. The other part about it is that for me, cancer is part of my body. And like there are cells that have gone AWOL, they don't know what they're doing, so they're reproducing themselves. But to be at battle with cancer means I'm at battle with my own body. And I don't find that healing. There's certainly times when, you know, it requires some exertion, and you know, you live through some hard things, but it's not, for me, it just never was about a battle. I always said I'm more of a lover than a fighter, you know. I there's lots of times I'd rather just kind of curl up on the bed and rest with Pearl when things were the worst. And I think that was healthy for me, you know. And it may be just my personality. I don't know. So like I said, I don't want to take that away from people, because I know it's a very common metaphor. It just never spoke to me.
I appreciate that. I don't think until I saw it in some of your writing, I don't think I'd ever really thought about that. But I do find that helpful and the thought that we're battling our own selves. That's not very life-giving.
Yeah.
Or healing.
I prefer to be curious about it.
Yeah.
And kind of loving that part of myself, saying, you know, something's not right here, and I don't like it, but I also need to kind of speak gently to it in a way that I can listen to it. I can hear what it's saying in my life. It's not my enemy in that sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
David, I loved how you talked about using the word curious, because one of the most great, you've given me so many great sentences held on to my life, but one of the ones that I always bring up and I give you credit for is when we were talking at the time about what was going to happen with the church and Marathon. And I remember you saying to me that about it being the journey, not the end part, but it was the journey that you were interested in. So when I listened to you, this sounds very similar. It's the curiosity of this journey. It's still you, but it's holding that curiosity kind of reminds me of you talking about keeping things open and not attaching to the end. of something,
Mhm.
but being kind of, well, what I present during. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, and I was
David, I didn't
thinking,
read it.
oh, you didn't? Oh, good. So we can talk about whatever. Great.
I
Yeah,
did, well, you know, I felt too close to it. I know
okay.
well. I know where it is.
Yeah.
And I've seen bits and I've seen you speak about it and the speaking and all that. And I know it'll be beautiful, but
Oh, great. Well, no, don't apologize or anything. It was more just I didn't want to belabor some of the things that are in it with people who are going, yeah,
don't
we've
wreck the
been
ending.
there, move along.
Yeah.
David, don't wreck the ending because I don't know what
Oh,
happened.
Okay. Well,
The
none
end,
of us,
he's right
know what happened.
here.
Yeah, but we don't know what the ending is. None of us do.
It's not
Yeah.
ended.
Yeah, we're still
Yeah,
on the journey. Yeah.
I will read it. I will, but just
Oh,
that emotion.
that's
It's for
great.
me.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just know it's there when I know whenever I will need it. I know that it's there. Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, talking about the piece of the journey and
Yeah.
the
Well,
curiosity.
and one of the things I talk about in the book around curiosity is that the different pathways of spirituality, and that spirituality in our culture is much related to joyous moments, like we think God wants us to be happy all the time and nothing bad to ever happen and protect us and those kind of things. But I really like Matthew Fox, who is the founder of the Center for Creation Spirituality, who talks about 4 pathways. One is the via positiva, the wonderful moments, the mountaintop experiences. We all get that. Creativa, like when we're doing something or participating in something creative, our spirit awakens. Via transformative, where when we're serving, when we're doing something good for the world, working in social justice, we can feel the presence of God. But we have a real hard time with the idea of the via negativa, that in suffering, we can experience the holy. I mean, not that we want it, not that we're going looking for it, but that there is in that suffering the opportunity to be more awake. And I can tell you, for me, in some of the most painful times of treatment and that kind of thing, I was full of gratitude, full of not joy, but full of the sense of the miracle of life, I guess, in ways that are not. And I think a lot of people get that now when we talk about the pandemic, right? I mean, we're locked in our homes, or we're isolated from other people, and that. But there's also moments of clarity and beauty and curiosity about the meaning of life and what does my life mean at all in moments like that, and it brings out the best in some people in those times too. That's when you said about curiosity, Carrie, then that popped into my head, that part of it. Yeah.
And I appreciate that. Being able to find those moments when you least expect them, right? When you we expect them to be beautiful and on top of a mountaintop, and there it is. And if we close our eyes and forget to look in those other little places when we feel small, we can miss a lot, eh?
Yeah.
That's beautiful, David.
Thanks. Mitchell, did you have any questions online there? Because if not, I'm gonna read a little piece, because my in-person guests are. I don't think it's going to bother them if I read something.
No, not at all.
I don't
Appreciate
see
it.
any questions yet.
Okay, well let me read this little bit, and maybe it'll spark some conversation. It doesn't have to be Q&A either, like if you guys want to just talk about something that comes to you when I share this, that's great too. So this is a fair way into the book, and this section's called Unremarkable. So a med student did the initial post-radiation examination for Dr. O'Sullivan, my oncologist. She poked and prodded. She asked how I was feeling and wrote down what I said. She seemed very nervous. I felt like saying, relax, you're not the one with cancer. But I didn't think it would help. Dr. O joined us in the examination room. The student gave him her update. She began by saying, this patient is unremarkable. Shocked, I looked at Dr. O, who smiled and winked. Apparently, being unremarkable is, medically speaking, a good thing. Nothing showed up on the chest X-ray. A recent MRI scan revealed no signs of cancer. I've been feeling good and happy to be back out on the ski trails. Dr. O'Sullivan looked me over, squeezed and pushed at the side of my head. He slid his hands over my bald scalp in search of lumps, commenting in his hint of Irish accent, I see you've got it right down to the wood. That's when he crossed his fingers crossed, he sucked air through his teeth, smiled a grimacing sort of smile and said, I think, well, you can't ever, well, say for sure, especially in these rare types of cancer, but I think we've got it. He's a lovely man and delivered some darn good news. The best one is likely to get from an oncologist. He and my surgeon have been a creative, accommodating team. There is the added pleasure of their names being Gilbert and O'Sullivan. I hope someday together they will pen The Pirates of Princess Margaret. I'm beginning to feel less frail, more and more unremarkable. My own little energy crisis persists, but my smoldering coals of vitality are being fanned back to life. My playful self is picking itself up off the floor. I feel less and less like a bunch of bones in a flesh bag. Not that I want to leave the gifts of the valley of shadows behind. Frailty and vulnerability brought with it tenderness and a new kind of access to my inner life. It taught me to move more slowly with greater intention and awareness. Priorities became more clear. I couldn't waste precious energy on unimportant things. Each day was a blessing and a gift. Gratitude flowed naturally in me. While walking back up University Avenue to College Street, I found myself smiling. I really am quite remarkable. So too are Doctors Gilbert and O'Sullivan. So too is the medical student who pronounced me unremarkable. I hope she knows just how remarkable she and every patient she examines is. Same with the cashier at the Tim Hortons in the hospital lobby. I want to shout to people brushing up against me on the sidewalk, do you have any idea just how remarkable you are? Do you? How remarkable is this life? When my eyes accidentally meet those of a stranger, I try to convey with a smile, I see you. I see that you are remarkable. So that's kind of one of the story about some of the gifts of that journey.
Remarkable, David. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're remarkable.
Yeah. And how if we see that in ourselves, then we can see it everywhere, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And somehow vulnerability and weakness opens us up to that in a way that being powerful doesn't.
Yes, absolutely. Mm. David, can I ask about the choice to write about yourself and your own journey versus writing just in general with writing a novel? like that? Can I ask a bit about that process, or sort of the vulnerabilities maybe that went along with writing your story, or like, did you notice a real
Yeah.
difference
Well,
in writing with that?
well, I mean, first of all, I wrote the It's Good to Be Here because I had spoken at the Health Quality Ontario conference. And I think that video of that is still available online. And a lot of people came to me after and said, "Where do we get the book?"
Yes.
There is no book. And then I realized, it'd be nice to be able to share that a little more widely. And it felt a bit risky, but I'm kind of okay with that as a rule.
Yeah.
As far as shifting to a novel, it's funny you should ask, because next week there'll be an article that I wrote on the Town Crier online magazine called "From Fact to Fiction and What Lies in Between." And it's basically about how I ended up writing fiction this time rather than nonfiction, because all my other books and writing are, mind you, I write mostly about spirituality, and someone pointed out to me, for some of us that might be considered fiction already, but I consider it nonfiction, creative nonfiction, but not nonfiction. But and that the book that's coming out, I mean, it started a long time ago because it was the whole Bill Springer story. I mean, we had a pedophile who operated here in this community for 25 years, and somehow I arrived just after, and there was a lot of desire to put that away. And in the end, I had actually started trying to write nonfiction about it, but I realized those aren't my stories. That's not my thing to share, nor is it. I guess I had a compassion for our community that said, I don't know if you've read, what's it called? Malcolm Gladwell's new book, What You Should Know About Meeting Strangers or Strangers. Anyway, he provides some research that says, human beings are naturally given to trusting other people. It's not, it's not that we ignore things or that we, but it takes a lot to convince us that someone is untrustworthy. And the longer we trust a person, it continues, it's self-fulfilling in that sense. So, I didn't feel like beating people up about that. And I also felt like, well, for me, that it was a stretch to move into fiction too, like to kind of trust that I might be able to do that. I love the Margaret Atwood story. She tells a wonderful story. I heard her on the radio, and she said how she hates to go to cocktail parties because inevitably some brain surgeon will come up to her and say, "When I retire, I think I'll write fiction. I think I'll write novels." And she says, I always reply, "Yeah, when I retire from writing novels, I think I'll do brain surgery."
It's a great line. It's a great line.
Yeah, but for me, it was that, so am I equally pretentious that I think I could write a good novel, in a way that someone like Margaret Atwood, like it's only special gifted people who can do that. And so it was a bit of a risk, a bit of a stretch to say, yeah, learn how to do that. It isn't beyond your reach. It isn't, and to convince myself it's not frivolous, right? You write nonfiction about serious things, and fiction is, that, the sort of inner evil voice. It's, well, sure, it's a nice hobby. There's great literary giants, and of course theirs isn't frivolous, but other fiction is easy to present that way. Obviously, I don't believe that now, but it's sort of the inner judge that says, should you be applying yourself to something more substantial? Yeah.
So, David, would it be fair to say then, like being able to write fiction gave you the space and the attention you wanted to give to not taking on someone else's story? So it's almost like writing fiction you were able to still respect that it wasn't a story.
It's part of it, yeah, for sure. And there's a fair amount of friction in it.
Friction.
Yeah. I mean, it's something I mean, I also came to realizing, what do I like to read? I like to read fiction. You know, like that's what I enjoy. You know, I'd rather have, you know, Tom Robbins in my hand to read and make me imagine impossible things than Eckhart Tolle or someone, you know. Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
It's a different type of medium. And then I think of years of you writing sermons and then going into this part and then fiction. But I think it's a really neat way for you to be able to tell a story without having to worry about telling someone else's story. So
Yeah.
that sounds like the perfect.
Well, and I didn't tell the story about what happened in Marathon in the end, right? I mean, it is 100% fiction. I'm going to have to really make that point with people, because there'll be some people say, well, is that what? No, none of this happened. It's completely an act of my imagination. And that was, you know, fun, freeing, more creative, you know, than hacking away at details and.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how are we doing, Mitchell? Is this like a good time to be thinking about wrapping up, or there's some other questions? I don't want to cut anybody off, but if there's, you know. You're muted, Mitchell.
You're muted, Mitchell.
I'm not seeing any other questions on Facebook.
Great. Well, happy I Read Canadian Day.
And to you as well.
Thanks.
So
Neither of you live in Marathon, so there's no point in telling, but for people on Facebook who are here, the library has copies of my books, and if they can help you out if you want to get one.
well, and I know, David, I have shared both your books, or well, the children's ones too, but Postcards from the Valley and this one with people in congregations. And it's just, I think your vulnerability that Carrie Lynn spoke about too, that, you know, that has just, that opens all of us, I think, up to be more vulnerable, and the risks that you take in sharing.
Yeah.
It's wonderful gifts for many of us. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Heather. Yeah. And I want to thank the Marathon Public Library again, and Mitchell for getting us together this way. And it's been really fun connecting with some old friends today and then tonight. Yeah.
So.
See you, Pix. I wondered if she was just lying about sitting at the other end of the couch.
She's actually been taking notes.
Yeah. Pretend that I'm here the whole time. Look towards me every now and then, Heather, so they think I'm here.
She actually was.
Good
Night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Love you, David.
See you guys.
Thank you all for coming.
Say good night to your beloved.
I will. I think I don't know if she's doing her boot camp on video tonight or giving it up, but she's pretty tired.
Yeah.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.